Well, it gives me great pleasure to welcome back Mr. Christian Dye, great financial advisor who has a real bent towards real estate. And boy, do we ever need advice at this particular time. I mean, welcome, Christian. Uh,
Yeah, thank
Good
you.
to see you again. But when I look around the world, we had now this week, which is close to the end of June, we had the Swiss bank lowering its interest rates for the second time this year. We had the European bank lowering its rate. Canada lowered its rate. And then the United States didn't lower the rate. And when you look at all of the talking heads on YouTube, everywhere else, there is a lot of confusion in terms of what to do and is it going to go up and is the psychological part of the market there? And all of those things, I think, have a thing that need to be discussed. But very, very important, I think, is for people that are real estate oriented, like myself and like Christian, what are the secrets to growing and then preserving your real estate wealth, not just for yourself, but for the next generation? And I thought that sort of is our heading to dial. And you deal with so many people that have multiple properties. What is their major concern in this kind of environment?
Yeah, that's a great starting launching point over here. But with many of the clients that I'm dealing with right now, it is a lot about capital gains because the rules seem to be changing here, coming pretty quickly. So how to preserve that capital gains. And majority of my clients who own multiple properties, they're not going to spend all of their wealth, whether it be in stocks or real estate. So now they're trying to say, well, how can I preserve as much of this as possible? You know, what I've always said and what many of them sort of believe in is that they don't mind paying taxes. They just don't want to leave a tip. So how can we
And a big
reduce
tip, yeah.
usually a big tip, and it's sometimes like mind blowing, the amount of wealth that they have. Especially sometimes they hold it inside their corporation. They set up a holding company or something of that sort, and then when they realize after they pay the capital gains tax, then they pull the money out of the corporation, the amount that's left over for the next generation. They're absolutely shocked how what a large percentage has been taken, like up to 60%. So definitely capital gains, passing on the wealth, and sometimes they want to pass on the wealth like while living. It's not just, when they pass away. A really hot topic that I know we're going to get into is, what if the adult children need the money now to buy their own properties? How can I minimize my capital gains, and what's the easiest way to pass them on? And then one that's always on everyone's radar is, where do I buy more properties? Like a lot of my clients want to continue to keep buying, but in this high interest rate environment, also, housing in a lot of places is still quite expensive. Where do I buy? And then the other one is, should I sell? Should I just incur the capital gains tax now, or should I sell a property and just give it to my adult child, take the capital gains hit, pass it on to them? Unfortunately, there's no quick answers to any of these. It's like trying to get medical advice on a podcast. You're not going to do it well. Really, you need to work with someone. You need to, have somebody. I really advise people to try not to do it on their own, because then you're going to speculate. You'll probably make a mistake. And that's why, we're here today, just to educate people and to, give them some ideas that they can take away and then to digest.
Well, and there's pure wisdom there. And the thing is that you can't possibly know all the ins and outs of a personal situation. Somebody asked me the other day, what I have 5 properties, what if I die? What happens? Well, that question you can't simply answer it. If you're the only person, the government will treat that as if you just sold it on the day before you died, and it'd be all capital gains. So you might say, well, no, I have some grandchildren that I like. Maybe I start putting one property in each one of their name for the next 5 years, as I still intend to maybe live another 5 years. And the point that you're trying to make is you got to do some planning in order to do that, because that way you maybe at least spread out the capital gains. And the confusion, we had in our real estate action group, we had a lengthy discussion on. There's so much confusion. I mean, clearly, if it's individual in your properties in your individual name, you do have a $250,000 amount of capital gain you can make, without it making any difference to what it was before the new legislation. And if you have your wife in there, hey, you have 500,000. And if you had a son and a daughter, well, and you expect your capital gain to be less than $1 million, well, you could add them if you like them, to the title, because they have to be added to the title. But if you're a corporation, my goodness, the options are endless, in terms of what you can do. And certainly, I noticed that your first book was on why Canadians need to grow wealth using real estate, just to make the point that that is an important aspect of any wealth building. Actually, you can go back to China 2,000 years ago. It was the basis of all wealth. And even if you go to Germany after the Second World War, those that had real estate, yes, they had a massive mortgage placed on their property by the government, but within 10 years, they had totally recovered. Real estate is the thing to be in. But you're doing a new book now, which is the next generation financial crisis, you call it, and what do you mean by that?
Yeah, it's a working title right now. I'm working with an editor, but one title is, how solutions for the next generation's financial crisis. And the next generation's financial crisis is going to be housing. And the reason why I say that is because, as you know, my background's in math. In my first book, Break Your Wealth Ceiling, I just do a lot of math that showed why the average Canadian is better off investing and learning how to invest in real estate than they are, with their stock-based investments. There's nothing wrong with those stock-based investments like mutual funds. It's just not going to get you rich. It'll just prevent you from being poor. Whereas if you said, I want not only to be rich, I want generational wealth. Like I want to set up my kids and my grandkids, like generational wealth. But I'm an average Canadian. I'm a teacher. I'm an engineer. I'm a nurse. Then real estate is the only way to do it that I feel, without taking on a lot of volatility. So in the next book, which talks about the next generation's financial crisis. Now, you think we've got a gap now in our housing and affordability. Wait till the next generation. And that's what I'm doing. I'm doing the math to show how much income will go up to the next generation and how much housing will go up. So the Vancouver Sun just released an article in this I believe it was last week, and they quoted the term Vancouver's real estate impossibly unaffordable. That's what they're now labeling us. They say we're now in the top three, with Hong Kong, Sydney, and Vancouver as cities that are labeled impossibly unaffordable for the average person. And so the book tries to get in front of that, because the old formula no longer works. And here's the formula: get good grades. Tell your kids, get good grades, go get a good job. Then you'll be able to buy a nice home and you'll raise your family in there. And then you and the grandkids will come over on the weekends. That formula for people in Vancouver is not going to be possible, not with that straight formula. I believe that we're going to end up having a next generation where, if you are under the age of, let's say, 35, and you were in a room and you were to say, how many people here own their home? The only people that will raise their hands are the ones whose parents either helped them or gave them a home. I think that, young nurse who marries that engineer, I think those guys, it's going to be almost impossible to afford a home, and they're going to burn decades trying to even buy a one-bedroom condo. And we're seeing it now. We're seeing it now. People who they have good jobs, and their ideal place is nowhere close to what they're actually living in. They would think by the time they had two kids and been working for 6 or 7 years, they'd be in a home with a yard and, going to a nice school. And that's just not a reality in Vancouver anymore, unless there is some sort of external help. And so the book is trying to get in front and saying, well, what are these solutions then? We understand the problem. What are the solutions? So what I'm doing is I'm giving various different solutions on what people need to start to do. And, like I call it 5 solutions, and I'm developing all 5, and I'm doing the math behind 5. I'll give you a little teaser as to what one of the solutions I'm doing, and one of them is to invest with your child, and then, like, a lot of people are growing their wealth right now, and they're saying, I'm getting this percentage, this rate of return on this, on my mutual funds or on my real estate or on these other things. But, your adult child, I'm talking about your adult child comes with capital-free tax exemption on their primary residence. They come with a single, if not a dual income. Maybe, it's that starter home that we now to invest with them. But it's not so much like I'm giving you this money and there you go, I don't have this money anymore. It's more of a let's collaborate. I have cash and I have investments and you have a need and you have this ability. But what you'll find is that give it 5 or 6 years, now they actually have enough equity in order to do something on their own. And depending on whether you want to do it as an early inheritance or, sort of get it back. But what we do need to do is start thinking outside of the box, because this problem is going to get significantly worse, especially in especially in places like Vancouver, Toronto.
Well, and it's happening that way now. Now, the big thing about real estate is always, in my view, we don't talk so much about it, but why real estate is always good or much better is of leverage, right? I mean, if I can go to the stock market, even if I buy the right stock, if I invest $100 and it goes up a whopping 10%, I make 110. On real estate, on that $100, I probably invested in some cases $5 or $20 as an investor, and then that $10 means it's a 50% return. So now then you ask yourself, and I get this question a lot, well, is it ever going to continue forever? And well, there's no such thing as forecasting the forever. I do know, though, that in my history, when you look at those books, first book was written and published in 1996. My mantra was that we live in the world's most unreported inflation. That was, a long time ago when I said it. And I said, if we kept on printing money the way we did in 1996, and actually going back to 1965, I extrapolated that 30 years into the future. I said, if by the year 2030, every house in Vancouver will be worth $5 million, and people thought I was an idiot because the average price was $278,000 in 1996 and 1997. How can you possibly get there? Well, we are pretty darn close now. We went to 4.4 million on the west side. I mean, it had a direct relationship, I believe, with Milton Friedman, that inflation is primarily a monetary phenomenon. Now, you can argue about it, go to Google and get all the different talking heads, but the reality is here. Now, the only difference to 1998 is that then we didn't see it. Nobody saw it. Now you go to the grocery store, I have a Camembert index, and it used to be the same Camembert for $7. Then I went to 13. Then I thought, oh, it was back to 8. And I realized they took 150 grams off the Camembert that they had before. So it's still being taxed and inflation. So if that's the case, if I believe that inflation will be a continued outcome with valleys in between, and maybe be interested in your opinion, maybe such a valley is about to happen to Vancouver and Toronto too. It does happen. Nothing goes up forever. And we have been in situation where we had reversals. But the point is, if I'm a young guy or a young girl and I simply can't get into the house, then maybe the father and the mother could use some tools to help them get into that.
I think so. I absolutely think so. And I think to your point over here, I always say the trend is your friend and to follow the math. And I hear people speculating when you said, oh, people thought back, in the 80s or whatever, I bought a house for 200,000. Ozzie, are you going to tell me it's worth going to be 5 million one day? You're out of your tree. Well, the thing is, just follow the math. Like in my first book, I did the analysis of Vancouver real estate. Last 10 years, average house went up 9% annually. If I go back 20 years, 8.5% annually. And if I go back 30 years, and remember, if I'm 30 years, I'm in the 90s now where it was flat, then it's still 6.5. I don't think we're going to be back in the 90s, but I'm very, very, very confident with what's going on now. We're going to stay in 8 or 9%. And I know some people are like, Christian, 1 year it was 16%, 1 year it was 50. Yeah, I know. But on an average, I'm pretty comfortable with going forward on a 9. If you take your condo, house, whatever piece of real estate you've got right now, and you annually appreciate it by a 9% right now, and look to see where it's going to be in 20 years from now, it'll blow your head off. We're talking about condos in the multi-millions right now.
And particularly where leverage comes in, you didn't pay the full price. that
Exactly.
9% you make on the full price, but you didn't pay. You paid 20% of the full price
Yeah,
or less.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so
And
that's why leverage has made people wealthy, and it is just not just been just an income. So I mean, now there's a lot of talk going on. People are saying, well, interest rates went down. Now we're expecting boom. We did that last year. Or people say, no, this time people are waiting for the second rate to go down. So under what conditions do you think an investor should then liquidate their real estate?
yeah, there's no quick answer, and it's rare that real real estate investors don't like to liquidate real estate. What they like to do is, of course, grow it, buy more, and when they need the cash, leverage against it, because then it's, it's tax free with the deductions on the inside. But there are cases when people should liquidate. Like I know right now with the capital gains tax possibly changing, possibly maybe you should liquidate right now. Take the hit. But I would only say, where is the money going to? If you're drowning in debt, okay, sure, maybe you do need it. Maybe if your child needs a down payment, and okay, all of a sudden now I'm just transferring it into another asset over here, but now I'm helping my child, and I'm taking the real estate hit, and now they can grow their money. Another possible scenario is if it's not a high performing piece of real estate. So if it's got $500,000 of equity in it, and let's say it's $1 million property, so you got a 50% leverage against it, and it's not even cash flowing. Okay, so what can we do with that 500,000? Okay, maybe I could buy a multi-unit at 30% down on a $2 million property or $1.8 million property that is cash flowing. Okay, pay the capital gains tax. So I always say the only time you should ever liquidate a piece of real estate is if you have a really, really clear idea of what this will be used for and why. Now, here's a case scenario that sometimes happen. You're sitting on tons of real estate, lots and lots of real estate. You're already, let's say, in your 60s, or heading into your 70s. You're gonna have more than enough money in your lifetime, but it's all tied up in the real estate. Maybe start enjoying some of the wealth now. Yes, you might not even be getting the top dollar, or you're paying like the super high tax rate, but that's the type of planning that we do. It's not a matter of yes, sell, don't sell. It's a matter of, let me ask you about 5 or 6 more questions and let's try to understand it. But really, really quickly, I would say, is it the best place for the money right now? And if the answer is no, let's figure out a better place for it. And then we boil down to cap rate, cash flow, and internal rate of return. How is this compared to the next best option?
Well, and that it makes eminent sense. The just in general, I've always regretted selling. I've rarely regretted keeping my property. And there are some nations in the world that real estate is for buying. Why would you want to sell? That doesn't even occur. And sometimes I look at one of our members in a group. He's older, and he and his wife are in their 70s, but they don't have a lot of cash. But they're house rich. They're at $2 million plus, maybe 2.6 million. And they thought, well, we'd love to help the kids, but it's very difficult. So I suggested, I normally don't like reverse mortgages, but in this particular case, I said, if you went, and they have a son and a daughter, if you went to get a $600,000 reverse mortgage, you don't have any payments. You can give each of them $300,000. That's their down payment on their own real estate. And then they can pay it back when you die. And so right now you have the best of all possible worlds. They don't have any payments to make on the 300,000, because sometimes that's what happens. You have to borrow the money, then you pay the mortgage, and it kills you, right? But now I've had a reasonably healthy down payment, and maybe that $1 million condo, the monthly payments are okay. And so yes, I haven't actually sold my real estate, but I've used an angle.
Equity.
And I think that's why they need somebody like you that has a lot of angles. I know they're insurance angles, and depending on
Yeah.
how large your portfolio is, there's all of these things that you can only consider on a one-on-one basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why there is no one right answer for everybody. Everyone's different because there's also a level of comfortability. Do I want to take a reverse mortgage, or do I want to take a line of credit, or do I want to sell this and then pass it on? Or if I live in a 2.6 and I'm headed towards retirement, or I'm in it now and I'm okay, do I downsize, take the capital gains tax free, and literally just gift it, which is also allowed here in Canada? There is no one right answer, but there are answers out there. And I've always said the most dangerous advice you could ever get, the most costly advice is just, family and friends. You got a loving family member who says, this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
Do this. And then all of a sudden you find out later from the accountant, from another advisor, from other people who are in the know that that was the worst decision ever. And we've seen it with the regrets of real estate. And of course, remind the three regrets. One, sold too early. Two, didn't buy early enough. And three, didn't buy enough. And I've seen it before with the sold too early. The market's at an all-time high. You should totally sell this property over here. All of a sudden, 10 years pass, and they're like, that was the greatest mistake I ever made. That mistake cost me in the neighborhood of $1 million to multi-millions of dollars selling your home too early.
Well, and again, that's also a personal preference. I think I like your point that if you don't know what you're going to do with the money after you sold, then don't sell. It's funny. I had a couple that came and saw me this several years ago, and they had a place near Squamish. It's a place where the eagles fly, and they said they wondered should they sell or not. And I said, well, I went through all the options that they had, and every 5 minutes the guy says, I just hate that place. I kept on saying, I just hate that place. And so we worked out all that. As I finally said, look, just a minute. You had about 6 times you said you hate it. Sell it. Why would you want to keep anything that you really, really hate? What's the point? Whether you make more money every time you hear about it, you drive along, somebody says the weather in Squamish, you start thinking about your investment, get rid of it. But buy something else and then look at the area. In our club, we actually have, the idea about how to buy real estate is, well, people will always say, should I buy Port Alberni or Port Coquitlam? Well, how the heck do I know? What kind of real estate are you looking at? And both might be a good investment. But the point is, you personally have to make the decision, do some study, do the math evaluations, and then you decide. No question about it. So for investors that you're talking about, where are you finding real estate deals and in this kind of environment?
Yeah, to remind people, our financial practice is centered around people who are investing in real estate, people who are growing their wealth in real estate. And, one of the services that we provide is help them to look at areas and we do comparisons of the areas they're looking at. Like you said, Port Alberni. Okay, if they said, I'm thinking of buying in Port Alberni, Christian, then we would analyze it on our own. And we would sort of say, here's the cap rate, the cash flow, and the internal rate of return that we believe that this area is going to do. But then we will show them the areas that we're looking at. So Alberta, we've been talking about Alberta for a while now. Many of our clients who followed us into Alberta have done very, very, very well. I've invested in Alberta, but where in Alberta? Well, it's a bit of a moving target. When we were saying Calgary, 2 years ago, Calgary, it was very, very affordable. It still is relative to Vancouver, but it has really popped in 2023. So those in 2022, 2021 that listen to us, our investors that listen to us, oh my goodness, they're very, very happy with the returns. But there's still other areas, in Alberta, in Ontario, and even in BC. Now, it might not be like, Metro Vancouver, BC, but there are areas. And the other thing too is it's about levels of comfortability. Like, what are you comfortable with? We have clients who says, I want you to help me grow my real estate portfolio. Fantastic. Oh, by the way, I got to be able to drive to it. And then I'm like, okay, like it's going to be limited. It's
Yeah.
going to be limited, but let's figure out the highest and best usage of assets, and that's your level of comfortability. He says, no, no, no. Other people, most of our clients realize that there are better deals elsewhere, but then they don't know what to do. They don't know how to do it, and that's where our team comes in. We sort of said, we already have the property management team. We already have all these other things, and so that's how we help. But the areas that we're really liking right now, there's some northern parts of BC. There's several places kind of in that Edmonton, Calgary corridor area. We now have a relationship with a team out in Saskatchewan. And then my partner, who is based out of Ontario, is on the ground looking at not so much in Toronto, but in those outlying cities, especially the college town cities. So we are looking in very different places. And for people who want to invest outside of Canada, then the US and Mexico are other areas we analyze for them. And we also have real estate teams that are there that help support Canadians to buy real estate. So really, it's kind of a very, very wide mix. We have clients who say, oh, I'm thinking of going back to Ireland where I'm originally from, or Australia, and I have money. Would I be better off investing here in Canada? And here's the areas I like, or back in Ireland, and here's the data. Now, we don't have teams out in Ireland, but we could analyze it. We could analyze it based off the data. We could kind of do a comparison just to help them to understand where is the best mix. Because let's pretend if Ireland is, completely out of whack with their numbers, terrible cap rates, terrible cash flow, then they could just stop wasting their time because they realize even on their best day, they're not going to do better than the other area to begin with.
So the key is that you analyze. You're not really out there. You say you have a beautiful building in Ireland that you want to sell, and then sell your clients into it. That's not your job.
No. You remember, I'm not a realtor.
Right.
So I'm the financial advisor. I'm advising you which way to go. But one of our added services, I'm also connecting you. If you don't have a real estate team, then like in the area that we're recommending, we could recommend one. Or you could find one on your own. But we're able, like Calgary, we're connected to at least 3 or 4 real estate teams out there, or you could just find your own. But back in 2021, 2022, when we were doing the analysis, what we were showing is this area is going to do really well. And here are the things we really like. We like the house that you could split into 2 units. We like certain condos in certain areas over here. And you know what? There were some people that were saying, I talked to my parents about I talked to some other people about this, and they said, I'm crazy, I should not go into Calgary. And then the smart one said, Christian, you showed me the data and I believe the data. The ones who said, nope, I'm going to listen to them, they were wrong. That's where the data shows. But we kind of like, in hockey season now, a quote from the great one from the Edmonton Oilers says he liked to go, he was successful because he went where the puck was going, not where it was. And we were saying Abbotsford Chilliwack, like heavy, heavy, heavy about 12 years ago. We were saying Abbotsford Chilliwack, Abbotsford Chilliwack, Abbotsford. And people were saying, oh, you're crazy, Christian. Why would I ever invest in Abbotsford Chilliwack? Look at it now. The properties that I bought in Abbotsford Chilliwack as a percentage have gone up more than the percentage of my own home in North Vancouver. It just because it started so low and it popped so incredibly high. And I think that's what we're going to find over here when we're looking at areas. We want to see what you're looking at and also the areas compared to where we're looking.
Well, certainly, if anybody has any questions on what to do with the capital gains and what it actually means, there's so much confusion that the inclusion rate, meaning the inclusions of the capital gain into your regular income, goes from 50% to 66.6%. It may not make that big of a difference, but maybe it does. But even at the 50% rate, we would advise our clients years ago that you might want to carry back a mortgage or a vendor take back and take the profit over, say, 5 years. You can, up to 5 years, take the profit, and that way you can make the capital gain come due once a year, 1/5 of it. And so you don't have the big whack all at once. Whatever those options are, Christian is the guy to sit down and talk about it. It's funny, we sold some, when I say we, my partner Ralph and I, we also own a real estate company, although I'm not a licensed realtor anymore. I gave up my license, but we own a real estate company. And we went 3 years ago and we really liked Edmonton, strictly on an investment basis. We were not looking for the huge capital gain. As the capital gain, we always feel the Lower Mainland. On the one side, you have a mountain. On the other side, you have a border, and then you have the ocean. You're hemmed in. In Edmonton, you can go 50 kilometers in each way in all directions. Same in Calgary. You have a lot of growth potentials all over the place. So we don't expect that same exponential capital gain. But the quality of what you were buying, we bought brand new units with what in Alberta, you have to be careful to buy not rental built, but owner built. And owner built means you have heated floors and all these wonderful things. Anyways, we bought owner built 1-bedroom suites for $170,000 that rented for just under $1,700 a month. I still own them. There's from an investment point of view, from a cash flows perspective, I don't really care whether it goes up. Of course, I care, and it has gone up now, but that wasn't the motivation. The motivation was where I said, look, I have capital. and I like that to work for me. I like it to work for me in real estate. It's not working in Vancouver. You know, in Vancouver, if you buy a 1.6 million two-bedroom condo and rent it at $3,000 a month, by no measure is that an investment. And maybe a great flip, and you might make a profit flipping it to somebody else for $1.8 million, although that's going to be a lot rarer, I think, in the next little while. But the point is that it's always a personal decision, always a personal decision. And when you make a personal decision, you advise of not talking to your brother, sister, uncle, particularly uncle that you haven't seen until he advises you. It's always better to hire somebody independent that is not selling you or takes your money and invests it in the stock market, but advises you for you to make a better decision.
Yeah, that's pretty much our exact practice over here. We switched for fee for service, multiple years ago, and the reason is because we felt that there was an absolute need for real estate investors to get good advice, but at the same time, they needed someone to figure out, how does this integrate with my retirement planning? How does this integrate with my estate planning on how I'm going to pass it down? And then oftentimes they said, well, doesn't my accountant figure that out? So I love accountants, and we work with a lot of accountants, but you got to remember, they're very, very narrowly focused. They're focused on taxation. If you talk to your accountant, what's the best way for me to preserve my capital gains? They'll say, sell the real estate before the tax rate changes. Sell the real estate, but the problem there is going to be they've lost the opportunity cost of how much the real estate would continue to grow if they held it for another 10 years. They're not factoring that into account. And if they did take into account, their answer might be, oh, you're going to have an even higher tax bill. If you hold this, yeah, you'll have a higher tax bill because you'll have made so much more money, and a lot of times, and I'm going to do this with my daughters as well. I want to hold the real estate, come up with a real estate transfer strategy to pass this on to my children so that they could hold on to it, because the rental cash flow is going to set them up. They'll then be able to choose professions that they want to go into without having the pressure of having to, make a lot of money, having to buy their own home. Like, I really hope that all Canadians are aiming to build their wealth so that they can set their kids up so that they could go into professions for joy, go into professions that they're passionate about, as opposed to saying, if I go into this one profession, I won't be able to ever afford a home. Well, they might be miserable in that, but there are ways to do it. There are financial ways to do it. Now, for the average Canadian, real estate really is the only way to create that exponential wealth. And then there are strategies to pass it on to minimize that taxation, and then, keep that cash flow going. I came across a good friend of mine who's actually a teacher. And he's on the verge of retirement in his 50s because he makes over $9,000 a month in rental cash flow. And his wife's also a teacher. These are average Canadians doing extraordinary things. There's this great quote that I'm going to add into my next book. And it says, what we are capable of doing in a lifetime is amazing. What we are willing to do is disappointing. And what I often find, it's like in other areas of life, not just investing, but it's like, oh my goodness, you're right. I absolutely can invest in real estate. I can build a lot of wealth. I can. You're right, you can. I have so many stories in my book of people who came to this country and did it in one generation. But there's no reason why you can't do it. But are you willing to do it?
Sure.
I see a lot of books right behind you there, Ozzie. Are you willing to read all of those books? Are you willing to expand your horizon a little bit? Are you willing to kind of get off the couch and just start doing it? And of course, there's going to be some risk, but are you willing to shift some of that risk towards whether it be buying your first property or going from buying condos to multi-unit, or whether it be, involving your kids in the transaction? It's what are you willing to do? But the information is out there. That's not the problem. The help is out there. You could join your real estate investment action group. You could, take me and my team on as advisors. Like, all of it you have access to, but are you willing to do it?
No question. And if you don't want to spend any money, you can go to the library. There's tons of books. And the thing is that we have a history of inflation in the last 50 years that is mind-boggling. I used to have a coffee shop. It's a long time ago. It's in the 70s. And it was a fish and chips franchise. I bought it because I bought a 7th Street apartment building. It just so happened to be the ground floor. And since I have a restaurant background, I thought I could do better. But just to give you an idea about inflation that young people today just don't understand. I would sell chocolate bars as well as my fish and chips. By the way, my fish and chips were 35 cents for 2 pieces of fish and chips. 35 cents. That's now what, $11, $12 on average, more in a restaurant. But the chocolate bars came in 24 chocolate bars. And for me to buy those 24 chocolate bars and sell them at 10 cents a piece, because that was the cost of the chocolate bar, I had to pay $1.80 to get those 24 bars. So I had to sell all 24 bars to make 60 cents. Now you consider that and say, well, that's so old. No, but that's reality. Real estate was $15,000 a house on the east side, 22,000 on the west side. And we've gone through a lot of gyrations since then, but in the end, it always came back to it. The more money we created out of thin air, the more it settled into hard assets. I believe that is going to continue, but it's going to be different. Every era, every valley, every height has a slight difference, and that's why we need independent advice. So if we want to get a hold of you, do you have a website that you can tell me?
Yeah, absolutely. So of course, my company is called Latitude West Financial, and then our website is www.latitude, and then it's dash like a hyphen west, and then .ca. And then if you want to email, if you wanted to email me, or my assistant, my assistant would probably be the better one. Then it would go through Jean, like blue jeans, JEAN, at latitude-west.ca. The one challenging thing is, our practice is very, very busy. And so what we often find is we always have a complimentary call, a complimentary discovery meeting, just to hear a little bit more about, what it is you're looking for. Is there even a right fit with our practice? And if not, I'll just kind of, point you in the right direction. But we're a little bit becoming a bit of a rare commodity now, and I'm noticing it in my meeting schedule how incredibly packed it is these days. So if you did want to reach out, absolutely, we want to talk to you. You might be waiting a little bit, which is also not a bad thing. You just have to be a little bit patient. We're finding that we've become a little bit of my assistant calls us, we're the Taylor Swift of financial planning. It's very, very hard to get tickets to see the show, so to speak. But you can see it if you're willing to wait a little bit. But yeah, by all means, reach out to us. And I think the number one reason why we're so busy is that a colleague of mine pointed it out. He says, Christian, with what you and your team are doing, I was just at the MDRT conference, and the $1 Million Roundtable, and they were basically saying, Christian, there's 7,000 advisors here, and you and your team are one of 7,000 in the financial planning, investment in the stock market space. But in the financial advising, real estate space, you are one of one. And then he says, what you're doing is very, very unique. And he's like, good on you, because there's a real need for that. And I think because I really, really enjoy my practice, because I've grown my wealth using real estate, that's why I am happy to speak with you, because I don't feel that there are a lot of other options for people out there when they're trying to figure out what to do with their real estate, how to pass it on, where they do need an advisor because they're talking about retirement, they're talking about estate planning, but they don't want somebody to say the words, get out of real estate, put it all in this mutual fund, put it with us, invest with us. They sort of say, that's not how I'm planning on growing my wealth. I still need the advice. Then I highly recommend, go the fee for service model. It's a better model because it's more transparent. You know exactly what you're getting, and the advice is non-biased.
Okay, well, we're going to put the website in the comment section. If you're watching this on YouTube, just click below, and also click on subscribe and like. And if you listen to it at Ozbuzz, it's latitude-west.ca. Thank you very much, Christian.
No problem. This has been fantastic.
Take care.